So I cannot believe we're in Big Ten country. It just blows my mind that we are sitting here in Big Ten country. Why are we sitting here in Big Ten country? Why do you think UCLA and USC leaving for the Big Ten, and then we all know Oregon and Washington joining after that? Why did that happen?
Because what has happened is the difference between the haves and the have-nots got so severe economically that you either are, which is what you're going to see, or as you're on the verge of happening, you're in the Big Ten or the SEC, and to be clear, the Big 12 and the ACC are at least a step down. And if you're not in that ecosystem, you might as well play, and there's nothing wrong with it, but you're playing Ivy League sports. No scholarships, more than club, less than big boy football and all the other D1 sports, because USC and UCLA's economics, day one of this Big Ten calendar year, is incremental $40 million of revenue by doing nothing other than switching a conference.
That's it.
Just by going from the Pac-12 to the Big Ten, they will get an extra $40 million a year. And what people miss is, so yes, we can talk about NIL, and that's a big piece of this. But the other part about the ecosystem is the coaches' salaries, the facilities, the infrastructure. By the way, what the women's softball coach makes, what's the baseball coach makes. There's so much money in the Big Ten and the SEC that it goes through the whole system. And you can't compete unless you're part of the system. So UCLA can pay our women's basketball coach, Corey Close, who's great. She pays a lot. She could pay a lot of money. If she went to the SEC, she'd probably make 3x. So if you're not in the Big Ten, you're losing, and you just become essentially a developmental system for the Big Ten and the SEC. And as I like to say, it's not an accident that the Big Ten and the SEC look a whole lot like the AFC and the NFC.
Because that's where it's going.
100%.
I mean, it's going that way where because NIL is part of this, and so is transfer portal, and so is scheduling. It's all stuff that has no codified, writ large, coast to coast, everybody involved guidelines.
Correct.
There's no one governing body that has 100% everything locked in, where everybody's scheduling the same, everybody deals with NIL the same, everybody deals with transfer portal the same. And the reason why they don't deal with it the same is, as you said, there's haves and have-nots. And there's only one way for this to go, is that everybody who has the same issues financially and has the same standing financially will get together and figure out how to deal with all of this stuff themselves.
Correct.
And the question is, who is the entity that puts that thing together?
So the only entity with the ability, I'm not sure capable or qualified, but the ability is the federal government.
Well, that's not happening.
It takes national legislation, but here's the part people miss or underestimate. If you're a senator from Mississippi or Iowa, you kind of like the system the way it is. Are you really going to take away from yourself to prop up the Big 12 and the ACC and these other conferences to lift everybody? Or do you like winning the national championship every year, or having the SEC get in, Big 12 get a disproportionate share of income? You're asking people to be truly magnanimous for something that is truly local and parochial to their states and their environment. That's a hard thing to do, to get, two senators from Georgia to say, yeah, we're going to take money away from the University of Georgia, who wins national championships, the pride of the state, and we're going to give it to Washington State.
Well, that's why the federal government can't be involved.
Correct.
I'm just saying that maybe the way that I look at it is the college football playoff system and who's involved and who's eligible to be one of these now, what is it, 6 seeds, I guess, that get buys, because it's going to be 14 teams at some point. That's the edges of we're now, whoever's involved in that and is eligible to be a seed in that, we're forming who the haves are.
Correct.
And so the question is who is going to be the commissioner of something like this? And then what does it mean to make the players employees of this system, and what that means for amateurism and student athletes?
It's scary on a whole host of levels, and I think we're at this turning point, which is college football is absolutely the second most popular and valuable sport in America. It's not even a question. The question is, do they monetize that opportunity and keep all the money in college football and don't share, and sort of college football becomes its own entity away from the NCAA. So do Michigan basketball and UCLA basketball are part of the Big Ten, but college football is its own thing. There's Michigan is in that, but they don't really, it's not really a Big Ten thing. It's really just a college football thing. And then Michigan basketball and UCLA softball are over because there's no money. Because the money, 90% of the value in the economics come from college football.
Right.
Or do you keep them in the system and use that money to solve the problem? Because NIL is not fixing the problem. NIL has made the problem worse.
How so?
Well, NIL, and it's certainly with what's happened at Dartmouth with the unionization and what's happened in Tennessee where it's explicit pay for play, there are no rules. You can literally just pay for play. NIL is truly just pay for play. And where are you going to spend your money? You're going to spend money where you drive revenue, and you drive revenue in football. So you are just making the rich richer in that system. You know, I think the average NIL deal in the country is $500.
Is that right?
But Ohio State says it costs them $13 million a year to maintain their roster. I mean, Ryan Day says that publicly. That's not a secret. I can assure you, in terms of Title IX, he's not spending $13 million. Ohio State's not spending $13 million a year on their women's programs. And so it's just made college football way more outside the system. And the problem is all of our sports, that the Olympic sports, if you will, or basketball and all the Olympic sports only exist because football provides so much of the economics to subsidize those.
So why can't we connect what you and I are saying is inevitable to the rest of the collegiate athletic system that we all think is absolutely necessary to stay?
We have to. And that's, I think people need to understand.
Thus the commissioner. You got to get somebody who's figuring this stuff out. And I think we can agree the NCAA ain't it, right?
They don't. They're not. They don't have the control or the purview clearly, because it's very clear the conferences, commissioners at a minimum, and the university presidents are running the system. You have to keep the money in the system. And by the way, you can't have literally having athletes as employees is a scary proposition. So let's say the president of the University of Michigan, teachers are part of a union, the janitors, the workers, the staff are a union. The athletes are now a union. You got different unions. Let's say if, collective bargaining for a Michigan football team, I'm certain they would say, well, when we play Ohio State, we don't have to go to class that week. I mean, that's not an unreasonable work condition request. It's untenable for a university president to have students as employees. You can't have employees being taught by employees. It is truly, now I'm not saying that the system is appropriate without athletes getting some compensation. One, I think we're minimizing the value of education, right? So if you were an out-of-state student going to the University of Michigan, it's $80,000 a year for tuition. However, there's 3,000 freshmen or 4,000 freshmen, and there's probably 100 freshman student athletes. Those 3,900 others would probably do what the 100 have to do to get free education. So let's actually talk about how valuable education is, because most of these athletes aren't going to be professional athletes. So the education is a big value driver. We're talking as a country about spending $1 trillion to wipe out student debt, but we're now minimizing the value of education for the student athletes. It's a weird thing to be saying. And then let's create a system where they can earn money. I think the proper way to do it is on a much more level playing field, a transparent playing field, and a consistent playing field. And it accrues while you're a student. And when you leave, you get your money. But this transfer portal, unlimited free agent, no salary cap system doesn't work, because if it did, every league would operate that way. But it doesn't work because it runs amok. And so we got to get controls over the system. We have to remember that it is college sports. And by the way, in this country, all of our American athletes who are Olympians are trained in universities. So if we lose that system, we don't have Team USA anymore. Our athletes, our government does not provide funding to the U.S. Olympic movement. There's zero federal dollars go to any part of the U.S. Olympic movement. All of our athletes are trained in colleges. And that's a great source of pride, and that's going to evaporate.
Catch the Rich Eisen Show every single day on the Roku channel, 12 to 3 Eastern, for free.